We now switch to the West Coast, to California. Hello, Raquel.
Hello. Hello, Lucas, in Vienna.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
And may I ask you that you briefly introduce yourself? So not only what is your name, but what is your background and what is your profession?
Sure. Oh, lovely. So I'm Dr. Raquell Holmes, and my profession is I'm the director and founder of Improv.Science, and I bring play and performance to scientific research communities to support us building inclusive environments for everyone where we can be seen. And often scientists actually, we we're like, what do you mean? We want to see us? Don't see us. Wait. Here's my data. Um, but bringing play and performance so people can be seen, heard, and valued. And so my background, I'm trained at Tufts and Harvard biomedical research. I became a computational cell biologist. And also throughout that time, I've been a community organizer, a builder in poor communities of color. And that's where I learned performance of all things. But so I bring that background to building community and sciences. Yeah.
Now, that is great that you studied at Tufts and Harvard and then switched or partly switched to improvisation. So how come that you start studying improvisation? On what is the science behind improvisation from your point of view?
Yeah. Right. Well, actually, so while I was at Harvard, I was talking with another woman of color, and we were saying we love science, but the culture, the environment that we have to do it in isn't always conducive to wanting to stay. It's partly the work. The work can be isolating, you get alienated, it's competitive. And so I actually very early on began looking for ways to support us creating a different kind of culture where everyone in sciences was thriving and wellness is an issue, people's well-being, mental health. So kind of how do you have a better environment? That's how I got on the journey to improvisation. I discovered in the sense of I created opportunities for people to play with improv and asked my colleagues, as I was a director of outreach and recruitment at a research center, I said, how does this help us? Does it help us? This is like, people are doing this. This was in the 90s, late 90s. Oh my goodness. Yes, late 90s. I was a pioneer. But people were using improvisation and performance for youth development, for working with CEOs already, Performance of a Lifetime, Kathy Salitz's group. I had learned of that. And as an experimentalist, I asked the question, does improvisation help us in the sciences? And what people said was yes. My goodness, I'm getting to know my colleagues. I feel more comfortable talking. I'm not afraid to take some risks with each other. This is really important for us to be able to do. And so I started doing workshops at Harvard, at conferences, and I founded Improv.Science at a supercomputing conference in 2011, right? So, and it was beautiful. It really was. It's like you have hundreds of computational and computing scientists playing and meeting their best friend, their new best friend in a game. And it's exciting. So that's how I came to the improvisation.
So some people, if they think of scientists, or at least computer scientists and so on, they often have the stereotypes of introverted people who do not want, like acting out, being on stage, and do this improv comedy stuff. So how can you connect the improvisational skills and mindsets to scientists, even computer scientists?
Yeah. Well, actually, a number of computer scientists recognize the activity of building. So it's funny because agile is one of those things that one can look at right? As an approach, the storytelling in it, the first I do my part, then I give it to you. You say, yes, I accept your part of the story, and I'm going to add my element, right? That could be considered improvisational. It's that we are people. Technical people are people. And so the improvisation for me is less about the comedy, although it's fun and it's playful, and more about how people can be in relation to one another and supported to be the human beings who might be really frustrated and not know how to say, really, could you get me this code earlier? Right? That kind of, so what they say is thank you for creating an environment, an opportunity for them to interact in a way that's also safe. And it's not because I make it safe, but because the play is an equalizer, and it is, nobody knows what's coming next. So you can't be, well, people can be jerks always, everybody has the opportunity, but the environment is created, the conditions are created where they get to lead with being human, with being human beings, rather than having to lead with just the smarts, which is when you're told for years that the best thing about you is how smart you are. It's very hard to put that aside and say, and I'm also compassionate, and I also care deeply about what I'm doing. So their humanity actually brings them into the improvisation.
Now you mentioned like the big topics from humanity and collaboration and so on. How? So how do you train people, or how do you help them to also, you know, feel their compassion in a very competitive scientific
Right.
area?
Yeah. Mostly what I do is I ask people very directly, can we create a culture, an environment in the setting that we're in right now, whether it's you and I, it's a group on Zoom, a webinar, designing a culture change program. Can we create something together that supports all of us? So I believe in grand challenges, right? Like you already said, I choose these huge topics. It's like, it's impossible. There's no way, right? So part of that is there's no right or wrong. There's only the things we try. And really, most of us enjoy an honest invitation to, will you play? Can we do this together? I would like to see if we can create a space where you do something new and it supports somebody else to do something new. Let's see if we can do that. And because it also allows for failure, my very invitation is that we don't know if we can succeed, but we have the power to try, and we can discover power. That's amazing. Most of us don't feel empowered in our lives to do things, right? It's like, oh, I'm only supposed to push a button. I'm only supposed to hand something over. So creating an opportunity where people experience their power at impacting an environment together, that it's just enticing. And their resistance is part of what we get to use. It's beautiful. It's like, oh my God, I hate this. Oh, great. What hate? What do you hate about it? Like, let's work with that too. It's important.
So, I mean, to create a safe space or an environment of experiments, that sounds fascinating. Do you consider that rather an individual approach, an endeavor, or is it more like a team or organizational thing?
It's all group. It's all group. It's the word. One of the questions you had is like, what is improvisation to me? And so it is the relational work. It is the group work. It is the social work. It is, what is the improvisational exercises, the improv performance is a social gymnasium, right? It's a gymnasium where you get to work on how do I feel when I respond to this person who made this weird face? Can I actually keep a straight face at that moment? Should I keep a straight face? Those are all different kinds of relational questions. So that's what I focus on. It's the group relational work. So when people come to me, I customize a solution based on whatever their group dynamics are that they're stuck with, right? They're kind of like, we can't get past this. And together we improvise, we build off of each other's, a way for their people to develop.
So what I hear is there's a relational aspect that can be learned or be seen. So if I imagine a person before a course of you and after that, what do you think could have changed for this person or this group doing improvisational exercise and activities?
Yeah. It's there are two things that come to mind. One is a degree of comfort, and even as we're still uncomfortable, right? Kind of going like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm awkward, I'm uncomfortable, but that's okay. That it's not meaning there's something wrong with me. That, right, we're all uncomfortable at some level. The other is the simple interactions when a Nigerian woman who's an immigrant can walk up to a American born white straight presenting man and ask a question for help, and for them to be colleagues, not one person being demeaning to another, where the question isn't because I'm less than, but because we're peers. That's huge, right? Like that, just that shift of daily interactions where you're able to ask and respond to one another as intelligent human beings who might need something. What can we build together? What can we work on together? How do we do it? So after the improvisational workshops, people have new perspectives on how to talk with their colleagues, and again, mine are improv and performance. You can't leave out the performance, that you have a choice in how you respond. But I get called back from 8-10 years ago, people saying, I did a workshop with you. It was really impactful. It changed how I approach every presentation. It changes how I have conversations with my colleagues. And it's because they're creating it with me. They're creating what's possible in that workshop with me.
That sounds great. And you also mentioned the word inclusion. So I think that it feels to me like people are included in a co-creative setting. So it's including differences and creating something. And if I remember the news in the last year in the US and Black Lives Matter and all these topics, what kind of connections do you see here on a societal level?
Yeah. Well, and again, the way that I started Improv Science was wanting to create a culture in science that was inclusive of women, people of color, people typically not seen as scientists, or when we arrive on the scene, people question our intelligence or right to be there. So this is a continuation. Given my approach is community building and bringing people together across their differences, right? The ensemble approach, the group, focusing on the group, is not about having everybody do the same thing, but how to, if it was a choir, to develop a wonderful sound from all the different voices, right? So when, we just had the anniversary yesterday, and it's such a weird phrase to say that. It's been a year since George Floyd was so publicly murdered by our police. And people who had been working with me said, Raquel, what are you doing? We want to do something, whatever you're doing, we want to do that with you in response to George Floyd. And I talked with them. I said, what do you need? And they're like, well, companies are having, conversations about what their experiences are. And there's some people are finding it helpful. So I created a series called Uncomfortable Independent Conversations, where individuals could come together, not because they agree or they have the same political ideology, they don't, but because they were outraged and wanted to do something new. They wanted to do something other than having an anti-Black and militarized culture. They wanted to be able to create a new relationship to race and class. So it's been a year. On June 19th, Juneteenth is a day for us. It's becoming a day for the country. It actually historically is. It was when the last group of people found out that slavery was ended, right? Juneteenth. But that was the first conversation of ours. So it'll be a year. And it's improv, it's therapeutic, and it's also activist, right? It's how do we keep creating with our differences a new culture? It's moving. So the relationship is, it has to be improvised and it has to be performed because it doesn't exist. The culture that we want doesn't exist yet. So we have to create it, and a creative act is improvised and performed. And I do that with anyone who will come and show up, because if they're willing to have that kind of conversation with me, I'm willing to have it with them. And we'll see what we can discover, create together.
I remember a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, and he said, be the change you wish to see in the world. What kind of change would you wish for the world in that context?
Yeah, it's the change I want to see is people taking the time to listen in a way that allows themselves to be impacted on. I'm going to borrow from Aretha Sills from yesterday, that allows them to be seen and allows them to see others. And I think when we're willing, a lot of my talks, a lot of my work is like, how do you be out in the world? How do you have your cares, your passions, and even your pain out in the world? So that the change is being able to bring who we are to see each other and to create a new path forward and a new kind of path forward. Or it's at least we're like, hey, I'm in it with you, where we're going. Okay. And that's what I love about improv. Up, we're going. Yep.